Ben, I often come across young people who may have been in the workforce for, let's say, 3 or 4 years. They have some savings and are trying to decide whether it makes sense for them to buy something or continue renting. Would you please talk a little bit about the tax implications of owning a home and what people should consider in terms of building wealth using real estate?
So the tax benefits of owning a home is that you don't get to deduct anything as a renter. That's just an expense that you have that does not affect your taxes. For homeownership, you can deduct your mortgage interest and your property tax. And of course, if you are coming in with a fairly low down payment, say an FHA loan, 3.5%, that means your mortgage interest will be higher and therefore more of a deduction on your tax return. Say your standard deduction is about $15,000 for a single filer and your state income tax is $10,000. Now another $10,000 of property taxes and maybe $15,000 of mortgage interest. Now your itemized deductions are going to exceed the standard deduction substantially. And let's say you have an extra $20,000 of deductions above the standard deduction. That is reducing your taxable income by the amount you exceed the standard deduction, which could save you many thousands of dollars on taxes. So that's just simply from the tax standpoint. There's, of course, other considerations just beyond the immediate tax savings. One is, of course, you are building equity in the home. So you buy a property for $500,000 and it goes up to $600,000 in a few years from now and you turn around and sell it. You have $100,000 of capital gains, and because it's been your primary residence for those 3 years, $100,000 of capital gains is tax-free, up to $250,000 of tax-free capital gains for a single filer, $500,000 if you get married between now and the time you sell the property that you live there with your spouse. So you can have the tax benefit of the appreciation in value on the property and pay potentially zero tax on that gain when you sell it. Maybe you own it for a few years and then you decide to sell and upgrade to a new property. Many will decide to retain that old property, convert it into rental, and then buy one. But maybe you're just not in a position to be managing a property and owning a new one. But you can use those proceeds from the first property to acquire a new property without any long-term capital gains tax to pay because of that homeowner's exclusion. The other consideration from a financing standpoint is that if you put 3.5% down on a $500,000 property and you sold it for $600,000 2 years later, that is a massive return on investment.
Too often, we see social media influencers dismissing homeownership as too expensive. Remember that renting offers zero tax advantages for wealth building, whereas governments offer significant tax incentives to homeownership. Because of that, real estate is a great way to build wealth tax efficiently. We invite you to cut through the noise and consider the long game. If you like this content, please like this video and follow us through the first-time homebuyers playlist. Now let's get back to Ben.
It's if you paid cash $500,000. I'm not saying that someone starting off from that age would have the cash, but theoretically, if you paid $500,000 cash for the property and sold it for $600,000, you'd have made a 20% return on investment. If you put let's say 20% down, just for easier math, if you put $100,000 down and sold it for $600,000, you would have a 100% return on investment. We're only putting 3.5% down. I don't know the exact math off the top of my head, but that's a huge return on investment, the less money you're putting down. Of course, you have to consider the fact the interest you're paying in that time slightly changes the math. That's leveraging. Sometimes you might also hear the term arbitrage, of being able to make money off of borrowed money. So that's a great tool for building wealth, is to be able to make money off of borrowed money. Of course, there's interest, and interest rates are higher right now than they were a few years back. But if your appreciation in the property is greater than or equal to the interest rate, then you're still making money. If you're paying 6% interest and have 6% appreciation, then it's actually not entirely break even because the appreciation is compounding. The interest is simple interest, meaning if you start with 100,000 and you're 6% simple interest, at the end of the year, you're at 106. At the end of year 2, you're 112. It's only based on the original loan balance. With compounding interest, if you have 100,000, at the end of the year, you have 106. But then the next year, it'll be 6% of the 106. So it's compounding and growing. So your appreciation is growing on a compounding basis. Your interest you're paying is not compounding. you're getting more growth on a 6% appreciation than interest you're paying on 6%. So, and I think that's a not an unrealistic appreciation value in California. Of course, there have been times like 2008 and other, you know,
Yeah.
things where the housing market hasn't shown a great appreciation. But generally speaking, the California real estate market has been fairly positive, and it would be not unreasonable to expect an appreciation value comparable to the interest rate, if not higher. No guarantees. I don't have a crystal ball into the future, but it would be a reasonable expectation.
There was a study a few years ago, I would say probably before 2020. Someone looked the last 40 years. I want to say it was between 1980 to early 2000. The average California single family home appreciation was about 9.2% a year. That's for single family home. It's lower for townhomes, for condos, and all of that. And there are fluctuations, of course, but yeah, that's definitely higher than the interest rate that we have seen for many decades.
And if interest rates drop, which they could, there's always the opportunity to refinance later. But it's better to start now. Don't wait for interest rates to drop because they may or may not, and it might not be a substantial drop, even if they do. For me, I'm young enough where I fortunately had fairly low interest rates when I started. When my dad bought his first place, I think his mortgage interest was 18%.
Yeah, my parents too. Yes.
And then they keep refinancing like every other year or so as the rates continue to drop from like 18 to 16. My current home, my interest rate is at 2.8%. Uh, it's improbable we're going to see that again anytime soon. But if my parents were able to buy at an 18% rate, then don't, moan too much about a 6% rate today.
That's
Obviously,
true.
we have a much more recent history where it was half that much, but it's better to start now rather than kicking that can down the road.
And that compounding appreciation, that even if it's 6% a year, that compounding appreciation is tax-free.
To
Tax-free.
250,000 for single, 500,000 for filing joint, assuming that that the property is your primary residence for at least 2 out of the 5 years immediately preceding the sale of the property.
Right. So it's tax-free until you sell, and then there's that limitation that you were talking about earlier. Whereas if you own stocks, whenever you trade stocks, there's capital.
Well, I mean, whenever you sell the stocks, I mean, if you're holding a stock for 3 years and it appreciates in that time, it's not taxable until you sell. So same thing as real estate, where it's the growth is deferred until the actual sale. But unlike the stock, you have the $250,000 exclusion. The stock has no such exclusions on gains.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for simplifying that for us, Ben. That makes a big difference.
And it's important to say that there are times where renting can make more sense. If you're going to be in a place for less than a couple of years, you're moving around, you're still kind of figuring out life, it probably doesn't make sense to buy if you're going to be moving away in a year from now, because the time to get the appreciation to recoup your initial closing costs, because there's of course realtor commissions and title and escrow fees, all those need to be recouped with the appreciation and then some in order for it to make sense mathematically. So if you're going to be in a place for too short a period of a time, like I said, 2 years or less, because 2 years is that qualification for the $250,000 exclusion, then it's generally better to rent than to own. Not every situation, but I would usually say 2 years or less, renting is probably the smarter choice.
Yeah, but you can start with a rental and just plan to keep it for a long haul, and then eventually move in if that's what you want to do. But yeah, good.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ben. Real estate is a great way to build wealth tax efficiently. Knowing the rules is the first step, and the next step is taking action. Plan your strategy with Ben Koala, our expert CPA, financial planner, and attorney. You can find his direct contact information displayed on your screen now, as well as a direct link in the show notes below. For questions on real estate financing and loans, reach out to us directly at Abundance. We serve real estate investors in over 40 states by accessing capital from more than 30 different wholesale lenders. We do the shopping and managing the process for you so you can focus on acquisitions and asset management. If you found this information valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe. We will see you in the next segment.